hi everyone. So yeah, I'm just gonna present myself quickly. So I'm Anthony. I'm 24 years old. I'm French, and so I studied transportation design in Paris for 5 years, and now I'm working for BMW. And so now we are here to talk about Gravity Sketch. So I just gonna explain like how I discovered this tool. So I think it was like many years ago. I heard about like this VR software where you can like sketch in 3D, and I thought it was pretty cool. So on Instagram, I saw like a contest of a collaboration between Gravity Sketch and Crypto Motors, and I participated to this contest. And the prize of this contest was being able to like try this software and having like a VR headset and modeling like the concept itself in this software. And at that time, I won this concept at this contest, and then I was able to try this thing. And I think it's a pretty interesting tool. So I'm just gonna share my screen and start my presentation.
All right,
All right.
Anthony, I'll leave you to it. Once you're done, let me know and I'll come back for some
All
Q&A.
right, no problem. Thank you very much. All right. Do you guys? I hope you guys see my screen. So when I discovered Gravity Sketch, I thought that it was super cool as a tool because so I became a designer for many reasons, but one of the scenes that inspired me a lot when I was a kid was actually Iron Man and the way he was like working with his tool. So like the way I was imagining myself working was actually the way he was working with like those kind of yeah, like holograms and everything. So like in this scene, you see him like actually designing and inventing many cool stuff as an hologram, and this is how like Gravity Sketch feels to me when I'm inside the VR, and especially now with those new VR goggles where you can work in augmented reality, you can still see your environment and work like this. And this is the closest I found to like give me this impression of working like this. So it was pretty cool. And so to talk a little bit about more about my workflow. So in general, like for personal projects, I just at home like a sketch. I'm going to present my thesis project, by the way. So yeah, I start sketching by hands to find ideas and like the things I want to develop. And once I found something that I like, I start like in VR designing some lines just to find like the proportion and start to play a little bit more in volumes and in 3D. Once I get this, usually I also go back on Photoshop and I try to just yeah play a little bit with the volumes and see what I can do with it. Um, After this, I like to use this tool, especially for my thesis. I like to use that tool to start looking for package and playing with like human size in those like conceptual vehicles to start to see what could work and what is not working, and to like start really thinking about different ideas and try many stuff. So this one was the package I selected for my thesis projects because I found like the two positions quite interesting for the project I was developing. And then I pushed it in Gravity Sketch, and this is what I built. So this is the final results of the concept I did. So everything was modeled on Gravity Sketch with this exact same technique. So I was playing with those lines, and then I start building the volumes on those lines and just putting more and more details and refine everything. Also the wheels, exactly same technique. And so yeah, this is the rear of the vehicle, and so it gives me the exact same feeling as Blender when I work, but you are in a more immersive worlds and you can already like play and turn a little bit with the model, and this brings another perspective, I think. So I found it really interesting. Also for interior, it brings a lot, I think, because when you, for example, from my perspective, I think if you model in Blender, it's really hard to model interiors and to play with proportion because you don't really have this feeling of like how the elements are big and how you can play with it, because sometimes you model something and then you realize it's way too big as you are inside this interior. So I think in VR it's super interesting as well to play with those things. sketch in 3D the good proportion of the object itself, like the seat or like the controllers, stuff like this, and then you can start building the surface on it as well. So yeah, this is another shot of the interior. And then what I like to do as well, once everything is set up, is to like play with animations on Blender as well in my process for personal projects. I think it's cool. It brings something to go more into details and to just explain ideas that you want to show. So I think the mix between Gravity Sketch and Blender for me is quite a good tool to express some ideas. And yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with this. I can project myself better, also modeling and then playing with animation. And then also I use this after to make some renders. So for example, in this, I modeled the environment on Blender, and then I just integrated the vehicles, and I was playing with the cameras and the light settings and everything, and I created this shot out of a Gravity Sketch model. And now I'm gonna talk about more like side projects and also about my workflow, how I like to work with this. So as I said, I usually, this is bad quality picture, but this is the only thing I found that I took in the past to show you what it could look like in Gravity Sketch. So this was a render that I did on Keyshot, and those lines. So I play with those lines and I put some surfaces on top to start like really building volumes. For example, here I designed like a robot. Then I put it on Blender. So on the left, you can see the model on Blender that I designed with Gravity Sketch as well. So I just draw the lines in space and I start building volumes. And then on the right side, you can see I did a render on Blender, and then I start just photoshopping on top as well to get this result. Then I also sometimes used, for example, I did another contest for Young Designer Awards in 2021, I think. And so for this project, I was working with Jules Elouin, another designer, and yeah, we wanted to come up with something a bit more abstract for this project, and it was really hard for us to like really think about something different. So we used Gravity Sketch for like making something really rough, but something that is representing what we wanted to do. So those surfaces and this tree was like the main idea, and then I used this as a starting point to get this result. So something more refined, also modeled in Gravity Sketch, with like, so going from something rough and just have the feeling thanks to Gravity Sketch, and then finishing with this result afterwards. So like I said, also for other projects, sometimes I use exactly the same technique. I draw the lines just to get a feeling and the proportion. This was an old project I did in the past during my studies. And this helps me to get the feeling of the car. And then I start building surfaces on top. And then I can use this later on to make some renders and express the idea I had at the beginning. This is another project also just for showing you. So I modeled this in Gravity Sketch in an afternoon, and then I did the render on Keyshot, and then I played on Photoshop with this. So this was also a very fun project. And as I said with the package before, like I like to just put a mannequin inside and play around this mannequin to play with the positions. For example, in this case, like the pilot is in a Superman position to have more sensation, and driving an airplane in this position could actually be really cool, I think. And then, yeah, that's another render for this project. Also, sometimes I like design architecture. This was for another student project I did. So I designed this architecture. Yeah, so I built it in Gravity Sketch as well. I used those lines once again and built surfaces on top. And this was another big project I tried on Gravity also. So for this one, my idea was to try to push the software as much as possible, because like those, at that time I did this on the Oculus Quest 1, and arriving to a certain point, the the VR headset starts to lag if the file gets too heavy inside. And my game here was to try to see what's the limit of this headset, to see like until when it starts to really lag and bug, so I cannot use it anymore. So then I try to push the details a lot, and this is the modeled I did in Gravity Sketch. So I played a lot with Revolve tool, and same technique as before as well. I just draw the lines and then I start like adding more and more details, playing a lot with symmetry and axle symmetry as well. This was a very fun project to do as well. So yeah, I think that's it in terms of workflow. So if you guys have any questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. That is amazing.
Thank you.
First of all, I would love to hear a little bit more about how do you envision this workflow taking place? Because you're doing some like really extreme things already in your workflow, but that's not the traditional way, right? And so, how do you envision this actually coming into play in the day-to-day work of a car designer?
I just think that this tool in general has some potential because you can really just let's say it like this. I think as a designer, you always start creating something with a sketch, and you like the traditional way I would say to like design things since the beginning of like this work. I would say it was like a pen and a paper, and thinking like this is so your brain thinks in 2D and you're like doing a sketch, and to make the object turn you have to sketch it in different perspective. And then we started to play with 3D a little bit more, because usually you have a modeler and a designer, and I think the designer that starts to play with 3D, he uses his brain differently and he can start thinking in a different perspective in a way that he doesn't only design through like a 2D perspective. So I think you can find new ideas and you can approach a design in a different way if you can already start thinking in 3D. And I think this is what this tool is doing. It's providing you the possibility to actually draw in space. This is already pretty nice, because sometimes you sketch something on paper and you realize that actually what you're sketching doesn't work if you like model it in 3D. And I think if you already sketch in 3D, this brings the process like a step forward, because then you don't have to like search for ghosts, I would say, and you can already like find something different. So I would say this tool has definitely a very good potential in that way. Also, like for the abstract way I used it, this is also something. I think if you have like a picture in your mind of what you want to do, but you still don't know exactly where you want to go, just like being able to create super rough volumes with those tools in Gravity would help you to have like a abstract image of where you want to go, and then you can just start to refine it more and more. So I think this is what this tool is actually bringing to me from my point of view.
Yeah. And so you mentioned now designers doing 3D. That
Hmm.
in like for a really long time that had been a no-no, right? Like designers do sketching, 3D modelers do 3D modeling.
Hmm.
But obviously like this way of doing 3D is very different. And ultimately what you are looking to do at the end of the day is just basically communicate what you have in your head so that the next stages of the process can flow easier, right? So
Hmm.
can you tell us a little bit about how you think this collaboration happening, for example, with a designer and a 3D modeler, like how is everyone working in 3D actually helping each other, like communicate this idea?
I used Gravity Sketch in a project in the past when I was working on this contest with crypto modders, and I think in that way it's actually kind of cool because you can just communicate ideas with lines. So like in that case with crypto modders, the the modeler like send me the 3D, and I was just trying to give him feedback by correcting the 3D with some like 3D lines. And I think sometimes it helps the modeler itself to come in to understand exactly what you want. So because if you communicate with the modeler in a way that you have to just draw the line in 2D, there's still like a margin of mistakes for him to understand what you want. And if you place exactly the line where it should be, I think it gives him um, more information to like exactly where he should go. So I think in that sense, it kind of it kind of like give a better perspective for the modeler to understand what you want. If that answer your question.
Yeah, everybody thinking and working and communicating in 3D, basically.
Yeah.
We have a question from the Ford Watch Party. Hey, everyone at Ford. All right.
Hi guys.
So, what is the benefit for you to surface in Gravity Sketch versus Blender? When and why do you choose one or the other?
Um, I think because for me, like for example, for a personal project, is if I design to model something, if I do it on Blender, it will take me a bit more time because I feel like on Blender you don't have this facility to really like sketch in 3D and like those lines like NURBS with alias. And then for already setting proportion, personally for myself, I think it's different for many people, but for myself it takes more time. And in Gravity Sketch I can already like sketch roughly what I want with those lines like NURBS, and then I can start building a surface on it. So the ratio, like for example, like the time that it take me to do it on Blender, it takes way more time that I do on Gravity Sketch. I think Gravity Sketch for me is a bit more efficient because it's also more immersive. I can really correct things way more quicker because in Blender, if I want to grab some CVs, some points that permits to move those surfaces, it's kind of long. I can use modifiers and everything to win a bit more time, but in Gravity Sketch, I basically just grab it with my hands and I move it where I want to, and I don't have to switch those orthogonal views to like change the 3D and make sure that every lines are like where they should be. I think in VR for me it's a bit better because I directly know where I go. So I just have to grab the model, turn it, change the points, and that's done. And Blender, it's more like, okay, orthogonal front view, I change this, orthogonal side view, I change this. And basically in the steps, I feel like in Blender, there's more steps to arrive to where you want to go. And in Gravity Sketch, it's just straight to the point.
Nice answer.
Thanks.
All right, so I'll read a few of the questions that we have here. Okay, so awesome design. How do you get such sharp and clean edges? Is it like adding creases or bevels in Blender or Rhino?
I personally don't use creases because I think it gives a weird feeling. So if I want to get like a sharp edge, I just add more loops. So as far as your loops are close to each other, if for example you have two loops, you have like a if you have two loops like this, you have like a line, but it's not so sharp. And if you put like a third loop in between and you really get tight, this is how you get this crease feeling. If that answers your question. And then I think for the precision, I just there's two things. I think I look at the line itself to make it really uh, like I want it to be, but also I look those CVs. Sometimes you look at the line and you feel like this line is looking good, but if you look at the CVs, there's one point that is a little bit below the others, and then this is how I know that the lines is also not precise enough. So then I just make sure that also those CVs visually are aligned.
Hope that answered your question. All right. We have one question that feel free to say if you can or you cannot talk about
Mm-hmm.
this. So this is from Jasperit. Hi, do you use this Gravity Sketch workflow at work? Also, what is usually a usual work day like for you in terms of design work?
I cannot answer this question. I'm sorry.
uh, thought so. Just wanted to ask.
Nice try. Sorry.
All right. And I'll ask one more question, and then we'll bring our guest Q&A
Mhm.
speaker. Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about the process from Rocky to master 3D sketching in Gravity Sketch, please? Your recommendations. From
Rocky.
Rookie to master 3D. I think that's something quite kind of like it's a big conversation piece because you know we're all as designers trained to sketch in 2D and now we're moving to sketching in 3D.
Mhm.
So how has that been for you? How was that evolution? Obviously you're kind of like almost starting both things at the same time because you're like
Mhm.
you're quite young in your career, but probably like there was a transition for you, and how do you kind of like
I
went into it?
think in my case, in my personal case, I think so. When I was studying at Strat, I so in the process, you're in first year, you discover everything. Then second year, you start to like choose or like experiment like different design fields, like product design, space design, car design. I knew since the beginning I wanted to do car design, but I was also following some accounts on Instagram, and I saw that very few of them at that time were using 3D, and I just wanted myself to become like a more complete designer. So I started to give more interest to 3D. But I think so. To answer the question, I think 3D will never like replace the sketch. I think it's just another tool that you can add to your stuff. Uh, because if you see, I like to see my process as a Rubik's cube, and the problem that you have to solve is the Rubik's cube. And then if you look at the Rubik's cube only from one perspective, so only from one face, you will try to find solution, but you will never yeah, sometimes you're going to be stuck. And I think for finding the solution, it's good to turn the Rubik's cube and to find other solutions from other point of view. And I think this is the point of being able to do 3D as a designer as well, is that sometimes the solution is not only on paper. Sometimes it's you have to think in another way and go out of the box and just yeah, use all the tools to think differently. And I think this is what 3D is bringing. So yeah, I don't know if I lost myself in the answer, but yeah, I hope it answered the question.
Good. All right. I have one more, and then I'll bring Felipe in. Because this one, I mean, it's quite interesting. Whenever we're talking about Gravity Sketch and talking about 3D, it's
Mhm.
very obvious for people to start thinking about other 3D software, right? Because that's what we know, right? Like we know sketching, 2D sketching, and then we
Mhm.
know the next stage of the process is 3D modeling.
Yeah.
But 3D modeling in a very traditional way of thinking about it, right? CAD.
Mhm.
So there's this question about alias. One thing that I would love to just touch on before we jump into the question is that now that 3D is suddenly like just blending more into the 2D sketching side of things. Like we're talking about 3D sketching, right? Like we're talking about not necessarily CAD. So something for the audience to start like thinking about in that way, as opposed to thinking about 3D and Gravity Sketch as a CAD tool.
Mhm.
So the question from Summit is, can I incorporate alias design workflow with Gravity Sketch? Gravity Sketch is a great tool for 3D previs. Would be really glad to see an actual workflow with nerves and polygon modeling tools.
So yeah, I think for what is the actual question? Like I didn't understood the actual question about that.
Can like if they can incorporate alias into their workflow with Gravity Sketch. So I think they're trying to look into
I think
how yeah.
as far as I know, I think there's ways to like import some Gravity Sketch to Alias, or maybe to Alias to Gravity Sketch. But I think it could be Alias or Blender. It's just like it's just let's see this through like a VR perspective. It's just Alias is a software for now that you look through a screen, and I think just bringing VR in this is of course interesting because we are getting closer to like a physical perception of the object when you see it in real life. So I think bringing VR in a process, whatever the process it is, it's super interesting because then you already can you come closer to the real perception you're going to have of the object itself. Because if you look at an object through a 3D software on a screen, it will never look like an object that you have in your hands or that is in front of you. If you design like a bottle and then you look at it in a screen, have the size of the bottle, for example. But if you have it in your hands, you will realize that actually this bottle is way smaller than you imagined. And so I think for this reason, it's pretty interesting to incorporate VR in any process, I think.
There's a really, really, really amazing question from, of course, Martin Bandeville. Hey, Martin, glad you're
Hey.
joining us today. So, any tips for sharing, for staying in an exploratory mindset in Gravity Sketch and avoid sliding into a CAD modeling mode?
Okay. Yes, definitely. So I think there's many tools in Gravity Sketch that permit you to do this. It depends on what you want to draw or like design. If I mean, because you have like some designs like a shoes that is more organic, and if you want to maybe design a car or a vehicle, it's a bit more technical as an object. But whatever I think you want to do, the best way would be to really try to detach yourself from what you know. So basically, it's like there's a very good exercise in sketching if you want to try to think out of the box as well, is like you just let your pen like go on the paper without knowing what you're doing. And there's some artists that does this, is like they're just like drawing some shapes and they don't even know what they are doing, and then at the end they look at the shapes, they like they're unconscious, if I can call it like this, draw, and then out of this you can find something. So I think in VR you can use every tools that are not precise. So every like surface tools that are, yeah, that are not precise, that create like rough surfaces. Sometimes like there's a tool in Gravity where you create a surface and you can already edit CVs. If you wanna get something abstract, I think I would avoid this. And there's another tool where you can grab like a line, and if you press, you can create a surface depending on the movement you do. This is already an approach to get something abstract that you don't know, and then you can start building on that. So I think if you want to go crazy, um, yeah, just free your mind, don't think too much, and use your tools, and just see where it brings you, basically.
Awesome. All right. I want to bring Felipe Rotero to the stage. Felipe
Mhm.
is also automotive designer at Volkswagen. Hey,
Hello
Felipe,
guys.
Hey,
Hello.
hello.
thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Happy to be here. I really like the last sentence that you just said, Anthony. I really like it about this. Keep your mind free and just lose yourself in writing
Yeah.
sketch. I mean, it's really the way. It's just like feeling the mood and really let you surf away in the
Exactly.
creative
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like
um, I
surfing.
have
Like when you surf, you just like let the wave like brings you where you should go, and you just
like
like
only
follow the
instincts and
movement
let's
of
see
it.
how it
Exactly. Yeah.
responds.
Yeah.
Yeah, but really cool stuff. I remember that I saw your first car like a couple of months ago, and I was having the same question of some people were already texting in the first one, like in the first part. How did you actually had so good quality of the elements, like really detailed and controlled surface? They were like really, really cool in Gravity Sketch. I was saying myself,
Thanks.
damn, it is possible. So I have to achieve it. It is possible to do it.
Yeah.
But really cool
Yeah.
stuff,
Thanks.
man.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
So, do you have an answer for that? Like, how do you actually do it, Anthony?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you just, like I said, you just draw like those lines, and you move the CVs to make sure that your lines are pretty set up. So there's many steps, I think, for doing this. You do like a super rough sketch in 3D, and like you just have many lines that are like defining your design, and then you lock the layer, and then like on Photoshop, and then you create another layer, and then you go like more precisely with those lines, like NURBS basically. And I think with those NURBS, then you start to build very essential lines of your design. And then like poly modeling, you start building on this, and then you just create the surface, and then you lock the layers of those lines as well before, and you lower the opacity, and then you start building the surface in that. And I think the rule in
Okay.
poly modeling is to really have as less points as possible, like you reduce the CV as much as possible, and then you're trying to find the best topology to have like a clean design. And then I think there's many tools, like for example in Gravity you have this bubble tool that is like smoothing the surface. So sometimes you have those points that are a bit
Okay.
unbalanced. For me, sometimes I use this tool. You use this bubble and you just like pass by the CVs, and it's just gonna like harmonize everything to make sure that the surface is like clean. And usually I do this. And if there is a corner where you have like a lot of loops, I also try to reduce it. For example, I had these problems in the red plane. You reduce the loops, and you try to reduce the amount of points, so there's not too much points in the same area. But I think it's the exact same rules as Blender, because now also what's cool in Gravity Sketch, I think, is you can also have orthogonal view, and then you can check your lines to make sure that it's not hanging and stuff like this. And yeah, I think, and after that, I mean, practice, but it's totally doable, yes.
Cool, cool. There is actually one question that I was really happy to answer at the start, and it was asking tips for improving the design. And I
Mhm.
was typing design and design and design and design. And it's the only way. Like really, the practice really helps you like improve. And I think,
Mhm.
as you say, like really spending the time to make everything like really on the point that you want is the only way of actually achieving the result. So
For
yeah,
sure, yeah, yeah,
I have
definitely.
one more question.
Go for
Yeah,
it.
no
Go
problem.
for it.
I mean, you have talked about, I really also like this set the feeling of the car when you were talking along. And for me, it's also like kind of when you're into virtual reality to really see how the car is actually performing in real life.
Mhm.
How do you see this feeling of the stuff will change over time? For example, right now we're making clay modeling for sure, prototyping, but how do you
Mhm.
see maybe like in the future the combination of augmented reality or virtual reality taking part of this feeling the car for evaluation for production, for example?
Uh-huh. I think just how I see that VR and those like VR devices are evolving. I think these augmented reality is cool, because I think whatever, even if like people don't model in 3D, or like in VR, I mean, like I said, this barrier of like seeing something on the screen is quite limiting, because also you might know, like if you put a 3D, whatever it is, like you put a 3D file on different 3D softwares, it's not the same object. Like depending on like the focal that this software is using, or like you can put like, for example, I don't know, like an object on Reno or on Blender or Alias. It will look different on every
Yeah,
software,
that's
because of
true.
the lights, because of the camera that the software is using, all those stuff. So I think VR is really like breaking this thing, because you use your eyes, and
Mhm.
and you have this like feeling that the object is in your environment because of augmented reality. And I think this is where it's cool, because yeah, you see, it's like when you have a feeling of an object when it's like physically in front of you. And this is what for now brings the object as close, even if it's digital, like it brings this object like closer to reality. And I think
Yeah.
this is cool, because then you like break this like screen barrier. And for design is very nice, because you can already like anticipate how the object is going to look like in real, more than if you just do it on the screen.
for me, it happens a lot when I was just starting and I was discussing this with a clay modeler. He was saying like, yeah, but you need to have the feeling of the surface and you need
Yeah,
to
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
how the car is standing. I was like, yeah, but if you put like in virtual reality, I was also making the same movements. I mean, of
Yeah,
course, I can't
exactly.
touch,
Yeah, yeah.
but you can feel the pixels along the way.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And also like you feel, I think, how the car or like whatever, like the object is turning. You know, if we talk about a car, like if you see it in the screen, you see like how the car is turning, but like I
Mhm.
mean in terms of surfaces, but when you see in real or in VR, like it's different. So yeah, I think if you design an object, it's very important to like have this reality feeling, and I think virtual reality is good for that.
For me, achieving this, let's say, level of actually living what you're doing in a way of what you're creating is okay with,
Yeah,
and let's say with 2D sketching, you can create your idea, like to
yeah,
visualize it in a way. With
yeah.
animation, you already have kind of the first feelings how it's coming to life. But for
Hmm.
me, with VR, it's like living the design itself, like like real time. You're
Yeah,
living what you're doing and you're perceiving it like right away in the sketch room. So as you say, it's
yeah,
like also this
exactly.
feeling of waking up emotions to the other ones who are actually watching. So yeah, I totally
Hmm.
agree with that.
Totally. Yeah.
That's
There's another
actually
thing
a
I think.
sorry,
No, no,
Antonio.
go ahead, please.
No, I was just
No, no,
going
no
to add
problem.
was going to add that that's actually kind of like something really kind of like really interesting to understand how this is going to start playing into how designers present their work. I mean, Felipe, you touched on it earlier in your presentation, but you know,
Mhm.
we're used on presenting things in like 2D images, right? Before it was printed pieces of paper, now it's screens, but it's still kind of like this 2D mainly. Now we're starting to
Yeah,
have some animations, but predominantly it's like a flat screen that we're just seeing everything through that, and we're not kind of like experiencing the design so much. So how do you think that's going to actually come into play, and how do you bring more people into the actual like environment that you want to be, showing your car in? How do you imagine that?
I don't know, Anthony, you want to answer first?
That's for you, Anthony.
uh, I don't know. She asked you the question first. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so from my point of view, in a way, let's say, I mean, yeah, when you leave the design and when you break this barrier of actually having a flat to become a 3D, it's much more interesting because you realize, like your mind itself realize it's something that could exist in your own environment, and then you believe it will become like it will become something in the future. So like in myself, I'm really encouraged in a way of keep pushing, let's say, the boundaries of the softwares to see what works, what doesn't work. But right now, for example, I would say the best way to bring these new experiences to the people who don't maybe have access to the VR, because of course it's, let's say, an expensive equipment and not, it's really hard to sometimes to make it work properly, is to kind of bring a little bit of this emotion, of this feeling of VR into a 2D format, kind of a video, kind of the one that I was like, like these 360 videos, let's say, is a really, let's say, um, I don't know, like a first level of experience of VR. If you have the glasses, it's much better for sure. But if you're able to translate this emotion of the surroundings and environment, it's really easy to do it into the people will get much more encouraged to use it in the future.
Hmm. No. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with this. And I think also it's like you say, there's like a feeling of the object itself. And
Mhm.
I think when you see like something in VR, like for example, if you design a vehicle or like for example a spaceship, you design a spaceship and then you see it on the screen, yeah, you have like this cool feeling. You see the object and everything.
Yeah.
But if you pull it in VR and you have the possibility to put it in full size, I mean, if you consider a spaceship, it could be like 100 meters long. In VR, you can
That is
do this, and you're like in your living room, and you watch like what you designed that is like huge, and you're like, what the, like
this is
it's
a
nice.
fun. I agree.
Yeah.
There were even some actually like first like libraries of Gravity Sketch at the start of the software, like with
Hmm.
some mechas and some with some helmets and so stuff. I
Yeah.
once opened one mecha that I don't know from who designer it was actually, but it was like a 3 buildings tall mecha. And I mean, my apartment is really small, so I was like, okay, 1-to-1, and I was okay, it's bigger, take the stuff,
Yeah,
and bigger,
exactly.
and I was like, holy moly! I was like, oh, this is really very like immersing yourself actually what you're creating of. So I
Yeah,
really agree with you. This feeling of is just the way to go.
for sure. Even with the pod racer, when I designed this pod racer, I designed also like the interior and stuff. And I mean, you will never. If you find like the money to create one in real, that's good. I mean, in mockup. But it was the first time. That's why I modeled it as well, because I just wanted to feel like how is it to actually like see it in a pod racer. Man, it's like
So you're making the
cool.
precision.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, good. Well, we're about to end the session, but I would love to ask you, Anthony, and also Felipe, if you have something to say about this. If you were talking to the entire automotive design community and they were listening, what would you actually tell them when it comes to getting them to open their minds a little bit into adopting this new way of working, knowing some of the pushbacks that you already know from the industry? What would you actually say?
Anthony first. You're first.
Tough question, but I think no, I think it's like I would say it's like AI, those topics like AI, virtual reality, everything. I just think that in our world now, it's like the technologies are evolving like crazy fast, and I think we just as designers should yeah just should embrace everything because like it's part of our era, and I think yeah it's I think in our industry, it would be just interesting to like just start to like think about those tools and those new ways of working, to just yeah see what we can do with this. I think in the future it will probably become something. So yeah, I think open your mind and start to like embrace those new technology to see what we can come up with, because I think it will definitely push the limits of like depending like creativity, maybe efficiency, those topics. So yeah, I would definitely encourage the industry in general like to go for those things, because I think it's part of like the new generation, I would say, and it brings also something new. And it's also what is super rich about this job itself is that you keep learning all the time. So I think it's also a good
That's true.
point for like the designers to learn, keep learning about new software, new technologies, and yeah, I would just go for it. Yeah,
I agree. Change will always come, so it is really up to you to
exactly.
give
Yeah,
yourself the chance to really explore it beforehand.
yeah.
I agree.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for your presentation and for
My
just
pleasure.
walking us through your workflow. And thank you, Felipe, for joining us for the Q&A.